Hello Narelle, welcome to LEQ TV. Today I'm very keen to talk to you about key principles when thinking about beginning service learning projects in our school. At an evening soiree back last year, we talked a lot about positive things that schools should be thinking about at the very beginning of the journey. I understand that from that conversation, you at ALWS personnel have developed and put together a set of principles.
That's exactly right, Meg, and it's really they're principles that I think we can apply to whether you're doing or the school decides to undertake a project within their own community, within the wider state or country, and particularly in an overseas project, because they're all principles that would apply to any of those situations.
Thanks, Narelle. What's the first one that you've got?
Well, I would certainly encourage any school to have a knowledge of the organisation that they're going to work through. And perhaps the very, very first issue is looking at the vision and mission, or asking what the vision and the mission of that organisation is, to see that if it is really consistent with, or is certainly compatible with, the vision and mission of the school.
Have you got a story that would help us understand that principle?
Yes, because I without gaining a vision and a knowledge of the vision and mission, but also without knowing where your money is going, if you don't receive financial records, if you don't actually get a statement, and there is now a government ruling to say that where any Australian taxpayers' money is involved, you should get an annual financial statement from that organisation. So if that's not the case, then I'm just saying that, Meg, to lead into your question. I was at a meeting of different faith-based organisations overseas, and one of those organisations asked if any of us had had any legal advice given over issues to do with partnerships. And it turned out that this particular organisation had been giving money, not receiving any financial statements, not getting any feedback, to a church. And they were quite sure that if they gave to the church, everything would be going very well. Unfortunately, they hadn't done their homework. They didn't know their organisation, as we are suggesting, with the result that when someone actually came to check, they found out that it was purely a husband and wife who were running a little business, and all the money had been going into them. So this is why it's so important to know the organisation.
So part of the idea is that school leaders should be building relationships with the organisations that they are partnering with in service learning projects.
Definitely, but I'd make sure I knew what the organisation was about before I started a partnership. Like a marriage.
Thank you. Yes. Get to know before you jump in. Yes, thank you. Okay, the next principle is about partners consultation.
In countries that I have been the representative for ALWS as the program officer, and that's included programs in Cambodia, Nepal, Mozambique, Burundi, Papua New Guinea. I mean, these are all very different these places have different cultural backgrounds, different beliefs. And it's often the case that when they see a white skin, that they figure that, all right, this person is going to tell us what to do. A bit of the old colonial days. However, we have the motto, or I do anyway, and I've actually, when I was back in Burundi 2 months ago, up on the wall was still written what I'd shared with them. And they've left it there over the time, and it says, nothing about us without us.
So it's very important to hear what the locals want to achieve and to be listening very carefully so that we hear what their perspective is. Is that correct?
Definitely, and that would apply even supposing a school decided they wanted to partner with an organisation for homeless people or homeless youth.
Yes.
You know, you can't say, now, this is what we're planning to do with you.
Yes.
Rather, you should sit down with these people and say, will you write down your needs and then prioritise those needs? And of course, you have to be very realistic about the human resources you have, because it's not about a wish list or a gift list. It's about the essential needs to help these people change their circumstances positively.
Thank you. So it really is about consultation. Thank you.
Definitely. Of course, we have to be very, very sensitive to our partners, what their culture is, what are traditions, habits in those particular countries, or even in a different socioeconomic group, a different ethnic groups here in Australia, if you're working with refugees, or another migrant group, or a disadvantaged group. You have to make sure that your policy is do no harm.
So sometimes actually gifts of money, for example, can build up inequities locally, and that can actually be the worst thing rather than the best thing. Is that what you're saying, Narelle?
Totally, Meg. And apart from building up inequities, it can also cause people to become dependent.
Yes.
And assume that the God-given potential that they have placed in them can just lie there. It's latent in them. But really, you are the ones who are bringing all the gifts, so therefore, why should really they change that situation? So to me, a person's dignity, their God-given potential, these are the things we have to really tap into and not harm that in any way. So our generous hearts sometimes can cause us to rush ahead, rush into something without doing our homework and making sure we are not doing any harm.
So I hear what you're saying is that it's about relationships first and foremost.
Definitely, Meg, yes.
And our next point focuses on inclusivity. Would you like to elaborate a little bit on that, please, Narelle?
Yes, actually, recently I was at an international assembly, and one of the points raised was about just watching what your discourse or your terminology is. We, particularly in ALWS, are focusing a lot now on awareness of people with a disability. And I can tell you a little story about a school that was built, and this was not an ALWS school. We don't really tend to just go out and build a school. But this school had been built by an organisation in one of the Pacific Islands where there had been an awareness raised of children with disabilities. And so a ramp had been put in. However, that ramp on the school was so steep that it took 3 or 4 school friends of the young boy, one young boy in a wheelchair, to actually push him up the ramp to get him into the classroom. By that stage, you've got 3 very exhausted young men who were kind of almost lying on the floor of the classroom because they had to push their friend up. Then, of course, in the afternoon, it's like an incredible ride down the ramp.
Sorry, I just have visions of almost like a ride at one of the theme
roller
parks.
coaster, yes. So when we say that it has to be inclusive,
Yes.
we're saying that in any project that you undertake, that you really must consider that nobody is being left out.
Yes.
The voice of the youth, of the young, particularly depending on where the project is. It may be the voice of girls,
Ah, yes.
women.
Yes. So there's a lot of cultural difference that we have to unpack and work hard to try and understand.
Definitely. And once again, we're talking about principles
Yes.
to prepare yourself. So I would really encourage you to make sure that homework is done.
Yes, before
Or
even beginning.
yes, you step into something, yes.
And the next principle is around sustainability. So whilst you're talking about doing homework, it's also having a picture of a long vision of your project as well. Is that correct? Tell us a little bit more about sustainability, Narelle.
Well, I guess we could look at this from a number of different approaches, and that is, we hear a lot about environmental sustainability.
Yes.
So that really should be a consideration also if you are going to undertake or be involved in a project where some construction work is done, or you are funding a particular plantation of bananas or pineapples or something like that. You really have to think about the environmental sustainability. Are the people being taught about the environment? Are they making sure that soil isn't lost to runoff? Are they making sure that they have a compost heap, because chemical fertilisers and pesticides, etc., cost a fortune? They can't afford that. So there's that issue of sustainability. But also, if you are involved in any project and you have a certain amount of money, you're running it, you are the main actors, and then the money stops, how is that project going to continue? Because you have been the ones who have been putting your energies in, controlling everything, funding everything. I have seen so many schools empty in developing countries because there has been no discussion with the local authorities, no discussion with the education department. An organisation has had some funds, it's built a school because the need was there, and with the very best intentions, they've also provided teachers or paid for some teachers. However, as soon as the money runs out, or for some reason or other, the project has to come to an end, there has been no capacity building of the local people, no commitment from the local authorities to make sure the school is maintained, teachers are provided, with the result that the project falls over.
Yes, so sustainability is very, very important. I guess what you were hinting at then is the next principle, which is actually about partner empowerment.
Exactly. And I mean, as you build the capacity of your partners, well, then they are being empowered and they can make sure that they're increasing their they're increasing and use their ability and in using their potential to be able to maintain that project themselves.
So really you're kind of working to do yourself out of a job. Well, it should be something that's negotiated from the very beginning. But
exactly.
One of the primary goals for sustainability is to ensure that as the locals adopt and work together alongside you, that the whole project is totally locally sustained. Is that correct?
Definitely, Meg. And I do feel that very often it becomes more about us than about the people involved. They are the focus. They should be the ones who do the planning. They're the ones who decide, this is how we're going to do it. I've just been in Burundi and Mozambique, and in Mozambique I visited villages. Now, because I'd talked about making sure, and we talked about inclusivity, I'd mentioned about people who are illiterate.
Yes.
And this was in the past when I'd visited, and I said, they can't read the plan.
Yes.
So you should have some pictures or diagrams so that they can see what is in the plan, and then give it a big tick if you achieve this, or add a few more people in if you've got increasing enrolment in schools. They can see it, it's visual, and so they are included. But at the same time, they have, if you then do that, you are making sure that the project isn't about you, making you feel good, making you think, yes, this is what we've achieved, but rather, this is what we've empowered the people to achieve.
Thank you. And that whole last sentence is really key. It's about what have they achieved, not what you have achieved. Thank you. And I guess moving on right again, it's about partner advocacy. So does the organisation encourage advocacy by the people? So sometimes the problem may lie at a deeper level, and the role for the locals is about learning how to advocate in their environment.
Definitely, and really knowing your linkages, how you link and networking. This gives you choices, it also gives you knowledge, and you can then know that if you have a particular problem, these are the people you can go to. And this comes back to the government, or what we call the duty bearers in a community. We actually, ALWS supports programs that, as a component of their means of approach, does encourage and does teach the people how to know networks that are available to them. I'll just share with you that this is quite a few years ago. I visited a group of people in Mozambique, and they decided they wanted to build a dam. Some of the people from the village had been into Zimbabwe, and they had seen a dam being built. Now, for us, a dam means concrete and steel, but it meant bamboo, because that's, even if building structures, the scaffolding is usually in bamboo, because bamboo is very strong. Now, and it's local. So they, with their knowledge, they've got the knowledge, they knew which way the water ran when it rained, and they could see that if they created this dam wall, they could store the water there after rain, and then they could perhaps put some little fingerlings or fish in, and that would be an income generating factor. They could have their cattle drink the water, and they could collect the water in buckets and water their farms or vegetable gardens. Now, all they asked for was some shovels and wheelbarrows. And so that was provided for them. They rostered themselves, and they dug, and I was there when they were digging away. But however, they did start to construct this wall. Along came the rain, and it was washed away, so they had to start again. And by then they realised that the local agricultural department would be able to help them. So, and this was based on what they had been taught by Lutheran World Federation through ALWS's support. So they asked the agricultural department. They were able to hire for a very low amount some digging equipment, mechanical digging equipment.
Yes. And
so they were able to get the area dug out, the wall built before the wet season came and washed it away again. And this time, now actually when I visit, not only do they have one tremendous volume of water stored back behind a very solid dam wall, but they have two.
Wow.
So this is about teaching people who they should go to and who should be looking after them in terms of providing infrastructure services, basic services.
So I can also see that as international connections are made, it's important to work with agencies already familiar with that country, but it's also important for our educators to learn about that country themselves as well. Very, very important prior to any connections and visits being made.
Yeah, well, Meg, if they don't, you don't put yourself in a situation where you don't know anything about that situation. perhaps you do if you're wanting to have some, kind of risky excitement in your life. but really, we like to know something about the context that we're moving into.
Yes.
And so for any project, as I said, whether it's here in Australia, in your local community, or overseas, you really, really need to know the context into which you're moving.
Yes, and I think part of that then and around building relationships is also about thinking about and understanding partner dignity.
Oh, absolutely. I really, I mostly go a little bit over the top with this, so please excuse me, but, God placed beautiful dignity in people.
Yes.
And really, unfortunately, if I can use the word arrogance, there is arrogance very often with organisations that think that they can tell people what to do. And the sad thing is that apart from damaging the dignity of the person, you're also robbing them of their dignity, and also really the opportunity to build that potential and make that potential that God placed in them grow. And if I can just mention, currently in Burundi, and Burundi was a country with terrible war between the Hutus and the Tutsis. Yes. Prior to that, of course, Belgian colonisation. But they are beautiful Christian people in the main. And I just see hope and courage and determination, because the programs are working with dignity and making sure these people, their dignity isn't damaged, and that is so important.
Yes, thank you. And last of all, just want another word about gifting to partners. I think in our society there is a tendency, we're very kind and generous people, so often when bad things happen, the first thing that's opened is sort of a relief appeal, and people give so generously. Tell us a little bit more and provide a few insights, please, around gifting to partners, Narelle.
I can remember many years ago visiting a school in South Australia, actually, and I was with year ones, I think it was, or kinder, or whatever it is in South Australia. Please forgive me, I'm not sure about that. But I asked these children, if, say, I came into the classroom and every week gave them some money, what would they expect? And these dear little souls said that you keep coming. And so we have to be very careful that we don't build up a dependency mindset. Obviously, after disaster or emergency, people need immediate supplies, and there are organisations that look after that. If I can just say that the idea of giving gifts, I have seen huge wastage, because with the best interests of the people at heart and the kindest loving wishes, people give goods that really are totally inappropriate, that break down, there's nobody to fix them, there's no money to fix them. So, I've seen so many wells and water points just sitting there doing nothing. Whereas if there is help given to build a water point, then there should be some training given in maintenance of the water point. And there should be a water committee that has that asks the people to put in just a very small amount of money, or if they can't, some rice or some spare maize or whatever they can, so that they're building up something there, so that if repairs have to be done, they've got a means by which to have those repairs or pay for those repairs. So gifting, I've seen computers that were not compatible with the system. I've seen computers going to schools where there's no electricity. Now, that has been with the best interests of these people at heart. It's certainly not schools or congregations or anybody wanting to cause problems. But so you really have to be careful about gifting. The other thing I would suggest too about gifting is, if you're giving a lot of money, particularly in an emergency, make sure that there is a statement that says if more than the money that is required is raised, that money will be used, which in particular ways, and it should be stated.
Right.
That actually is something that that a code of conduct that ALWS and many other organisations belong to say that we will do that, because otherwise, where does that money go?
Yes, they're all very good points. I just want to say thank you very much, Narelle, for coming in today and sharing these points with us and principles. Very important as we begin and think about the journey of service learning and how that looks in Lutheran schools in Australia and especially here in Queensland. Thank you, Narelle. Thank you so much for coming in, and God's blessing as you retire now from ALWS.
The old girl of ALWS.
Yes.
I'm going.
Thank you very much for your
Meg.
contribution, and thank you especially for your contributions as we've had our soirees, you've had individual site meetings with schools where you've posed some pretty challenging questions, and I think these principles that you've presented to us today have really helped and will continue to challenge us into the future. So God's blessing and a happy and blessed Christmas.
Thank you, Meg, so much, and you have a wonderful Christmas and the whole of LEQ.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Narelle.